in this lesson, we're going to be taking a particular look at basically the intersection of sport with a whole bunch of things that we've been discussing in class, such as gender, culture, society, and lots of other big kind of ideas. Okay, so barbarous baseball, bodacious basketball, and no female football. Okay. Now, here's the thing: is because this lesson is so station-based, I'm actually not going to go through each of these stations, and also because there's a lot of YouTube videos in them, I'm going to let you guys go through those. Okay. But what we're going to be looking at here, and kind of what I'll get to at the very end when I talk about some like the big ideas from this lesson, is we're going to be explaining the origins of basketball, baseball, and football through the context of really this explosion of sports that happens from about really after the Civil War all the way up into, well, really now. And so with that, again, we're going to be discussing these three sports, okay? That is baseball, basketball, and football. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and just skip all the way to the end, and I'm going to talk about kind of how these things intersect with big things in society. Okay, so, first things first. Okay, as you go through these lessons, I'm hoping that you pick up on these big ideas because they are really important. Okay, so number one, sport is intricately tied into gender. Okay, like intricately tied into gender, especially ideas of manliness. Okay, now this has obviously changed in the last a few decades with things like Title IX, and then also, you know, like the Olympics, which now balances male and female sports. But sport has a lot to do with notions of manliness and masculinity, and then, you know, ideas about physical fitness, and you'll hear this kind of language in everything from sports broadcasts to the way that we describe players to, you know, warm-ups and everything in between. Okay, so sport is intricately tied into gender, and you'll definitely see that through those activities. There's a lot of myths tied into sports. Okay, so one of the articles that you look at, which is a really, really cool one about baseball, and the idea that it's like the sport early on was a way that any player could, you know, grow up poor and then one day, you know, make it into the big leagues and they could become a millionaire. That idea is actually really, at least early on in baseball, is very much a myth. They pretty much that the players came from middle class backgrounds, and then oftentimes the people in lower class or specific ethnic groups were really not allowed into the sport, especially until, you know, really big changes that happen later in the 20th century. Okay, so let's see. Sport is as much about who you include as who you don't, which then, yes, getting to that exact point. So females being included in certain sports, social class, which you'll see in baseball as well as basketball, race, which you definitely see in all three of these things, okay, is a big deal. Okay, who you allow to play in a sport, okay, whether that's you allow only players from colleges or you only allow players who come from a certain ethnicity or economic level, it has a big deal in terms of like, it has a really, really big impact in terms of like how people perceive that sport and how, you know, how that sport is interpreted really across society. So for example, like golf, okay, is known today as a pretty white and also pretty upper class sport as compared to, let's say, something like basketball, which for most people is a lot more accessible because it's cheaper and also it involves less time than a sport like golf does. Okay, sports can be intentionally used by society for growth. Okay, you'll see this especially in the feature that is called From Naptown to Super City on Indianapolis. Okay, that's a bit of local history there for you. But the city of Indianapolis, under the mayor at the time, Dick Lugar, really had an idea that you could have a sports-centric model of growth that would really build kind of a way to kind of have people invest in a downtown environment. Okay, so sports they can be used as a tool by both governments and people, you know, to improve things. Now, also, okay, you'll see that on like a more kind of like grassroots level, some people like Victorians also saw sport, gymnastics, everything from cycling to boxing to weightlifting as a way to improve yourself physically. Okay, now obviously with all of the implications that we've talked about with that, with Victorianism. Okay, so in short, sport is much more than just entertainment. Yes, it is that too. obviously people spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on being entertained by sports, whether that's through tickets or commercials or what have you. But it's advertisement. Sports is also about social class, business. There's huge amounts of business that circle around sports. Sport is also tied into race. We definitely saw that with the Colin Kaepernick situation of this past year in 2017. So sport is kind of, as some people have said, it's like a metaphor for really the whole human experience. Okay, so hopefully you've kind of picked up on these big lessons here from this lesson. Picked up the lessons from lessons. I guess that makes sense. And other than that, I will see you guys in the next lesson. Bye bye.